Hello, Moving Mountains homeowners, and welcome to episode 3 of Behind the Wow, a podcast connecting our homeowners to key members of our teams and learning about things that happen behind the scenes. Today, I am very excited to have Justin Ford here. Justin is with Breezeway, and he is our safety guru. He is the person that comes in, he trains our teams to make sure that we are looking all around your home and seeing how guests might get injured in your home and making sure that we're keeping them safe. Justin, thank you so much for being here today.
It's awesome to be here. Moving Mountains is a leader when it comes to this, and it's really an honor to be able to share with your property owners. We did a webinar for your property owners a couple of years ago too, and there was a lot of great feedback from that, so I'm glad to be back.
Yeah, no, thank you so much. I think even though you're not an official Moving Mountains employee, but we look at you that way because we know how important it is to have you on our team and have you teaching us all this great stuff. For those of our owners that weren't on the last webinar, if you could just start and kind of tell us, how did you become a safety guru and how did you get into short-term rentals and collecting all of this information?
Yeah, and absolutely. And don't think because if you did see the last webinar, this is gonna be the same. We're going off script here.
Leaps and bounds, right?
Leaps and bounds, all different. My background is I was a firefighter for 15 years. I served in the U.S. Coast Guard, so strong foundation in safety. And then I actually started a company very similar. You could almost call it the Moving Mountains of New England. Did a lot of the same brand and type of guest experiences that Moving Mountains has in the state of Maine. And I grew that into the largest vacation rental company in the Northeast. With my safety background, I thought I was on point, thought I'd have everything doing okay. And then unfortunately had a couple of incidents that were very serious. One of them permanently disabled one of my guests. And I said, wait a minute. I'm a firefighter. I served in the Coast Guard. I have a strong safety background. How did I let this happen? And what are other people doing that don't even have those backgrounds? And with my research, found out nothing was being done to address guest safety. This is back in 2013. And I realized there was an opportunity to ensure that we were addressing safety in this industry. Sold my company in 2017, went all in, and things have obviously grown from then because as far as I know, I'm pretty much the only one in the world who does this. Just before you and I are meeting, I wrapped up helping somebody doing a safety inspection in Bombay, India, using my checklist. So it's truly a global program now.
Wow. That's really amazing. And would you say like there was like a very specific moment that you realized not just the one incident that happened in your home, but how many things short-term rentals were overlooking?
Yeah, there was. It's definitely one of those things where it's the general public. Now, obviously, Moving Mountains does a great job vetting guests to the best of their abilities, but you're concerned about criminal backgrounds and if they've been messy guests before. We don't know and can't ask about whether someone has trouble seeing at night, might need better lighting when they come into the properties, how well they walk, what their background is. And so there's a lot that needs to be done to make these safe. And the biggest aha moment is when you just take the home. The home in America is the most dangerous place that human beings encounter. I'm not talking short-term rentals. I'm talking at home. 54% of Americans' injuries on an annual basis occur in the home. And that makes the home the most dangerous place. And now you take people who aren't familiar with those homes and you put them in that environment while they've got vacation brain and a cocktail, and it's Colorado, so let's not count out a little bit there. So you add all those things together, and it's certainly a mixture where you gotta be on your toes when it comes to this.
Yeah, no, it certainly can be a recipe for things to happen if we are not on our toes and making sure that things are safe in the home. And I feel like, I think that there's definitely gaps still at this point. I mean, and I know you're doing everything you can to kind of fill in the gaps, but when it comes to safety education and that word of accountability, when you do have an accident in the house and now all of a sudden everybody's looking at each other like whose fault this was. And, I think that is the biggest thing for our homeowners is when something does happen to a guest, how do we all work together to make sure that we're accountable for those things?
So what you have to account for in Colorado is the fact that although Colorado doesn't have a building code, there is a building code. The state of Colorado has adopted the building code. There's just not an enforcement side of it at a statewide level. It's more of a county or a city specific. And there's very little things that code can address. Basically, life safety code, international building residential code is focused on those life safety things, smoke alarms, carbon monoxide alarms, and a few other things. But the real challenge is those are less than 3% of the safety and incidents that we see. And so, you're in a market like Vail where you have fire safety inspections. They're only inspecting for that. But reality is it's all these other things they're not inspecting for that are where we're seeing the most safety issues. And so that's where I'm filling in that gap. Breezeway's filling in that gap. Because although you may not go to jail because your outside lights don't work and it's not the code, and if someone slips and falls, it doesn't mean you're not still liable if you don't address those things and ensure that your guests are safe.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think too, things that I've seen before is also just making sure that we're educating our guests when they come in the home, because how many times have you heard of somebody like, oh, I'm just going to turn this alarm off, and they don't even know what the alarm is for. Is it for CO? Is it for smoke? And so I think, making sure that we're filling in all of those gaps and making sure to keep the guests safe in that way too, because like you said, they're coming into a home they've never been in before, and when we have to make sure that we educate them.
Yeah, absolutely. Guest safety is where everything starts. And here's the neat thing about guest safety, and we've seen this at Moving Mountains over the past 3 or 4 years that I've been working there, is a focus on guest safety leads to a focus on everything else. Properties become cleaner, they become better maintained, and that's what you as a property owner want. You want your property maintained to the highest standards. It all starts with safety, and it was remarkable to watch as guests review scores increased when that focus of safety started, because now, well, we've got to do this, and now, you're looking under the bed to make sure it's not going to collapse. Well, now it's cleaner under there too.
Right.
So simple things like that. So that focus on safety is where it all begins.
Yeah, no, I think that's great. I want you to know that I did take your safety course, and I think you saw my certificate, and yes. It is not a simple course. It's not something that you made it really easy for people to get certified. And so I just kind of want you to talk a little bit about when you were approaching that to say, okay, I want to start some kind of a program where we know that somebody is actually educated on these items. How did you sort of go in and tackle that?
It's so easy. And I know that so many people, I touched on this already, home safety, think, wow, smoke alarm, fire extinguisher, carbon monoxide alarm. And they think that's where it ends. There's so much more to it. And when you start putting all the details together, you realize that if you leave anything out, then you've got a real problem. The great thing that happened is the partnership that I developed early on, it's now 8 years old, actually, with Proper Insurance. They're the largest insurer of vacation rentals. They looked at what I was putting together and said, hey, just so you know, we're getting claims on this. We're getting claims on kids falling out of bunk beds. We're getting claims that are, within 1 hour of arrival because people are slipping and falling when they're not familiar. So that insurance data that came back, and we were able to put that together, is what said, well, wait a minute, I guess we better tell people about this too. And by the time I was done, there's 77 high interest points that need to be inspected in a property, because there's a lot of things that can happen. And if you miss one of those things or don't understand the importance of it, it can't be there. So that's how it went from just a few things to really encompassing everything. It's now the most comprehensive home safety course, not only just for short-term rentals, but globally in the world. No one has gone as in-depth as we have to cover everything that you need to know.
Yeah, no, I know. After I took the course, I was going all through my own house and saying, all right, what do I need to do here to make my house safer? Because there were just so many things that I think, day to day, you just don't really think about those things. And and you have to, because it's so easy for people to get hurt in a space that they're not comfortable with. So I really appreciate that, and definitely want our owners to know, I mean, this course is 8 to 10 hours of education, and then a very difficult test afterwards. So once one of our team members safety certified, they all say when they walk into a house, they look at it completely differently. And I get that, because I went to look at a potential home to bring into our portfolio, and the minute I stepped out on the third story deck, I was like, there's no way we can have this home in our portfolio, because the railing was so low.
Yes.
So it definitely makes you look at things differently.
I think it's important that the property owners understand it's not your fault if your property wasn't set up safe. It's a fundamental problem with our society. And I'm focused obviously here on the United States. It's globally, it's a problem too. They actually have more home safety issues in New Zealand than America. So we're not the worst. But the reality is, when it comes to Western countries, the Japanese are the best at home safety. They are very focused. It's their culture. Every kid, by the time he gets through kindergarten, knows how to use a fire extinguisher, and they have fire extinguisher training in the schools. In America, we don't do that. We don't have that. So it hasn't been put in front of you. We're more worried about, gun safety and things like that, which is certainly important, but more people are injured in homes than they are by guns. So it's just what we've prioritized as a society. That's why it's so important that your company, Moving Mountains, is focused on this safety for you, because you just didn't get that education in school. So they're stepping in to fill that gap.
Yeah. And I think people don't think about that. We all think we know how to use a fire extinguisher, but I found that really interesting in the training, that somebody hands you a fire extinguisher in an emergency case. Yep. Do you really know what you're doing to use it? And so having a fire blanket, that is a lot easier for somebody to say, okay, I know I just have to pick this up and I have to cover this. So having all of those items available to our guests, I think, puts them in the best space to say, oh my gosh, there's a fire, and here's options, that you can grab something, to try to mitigate an emergency like that. So speaking of, I know we think of, we talk about fires, we talk about things. What is, the most common accidents that you see and hear about in short-term rentals?
Well, it's a slip, trip, and fall. It's the same as in the home as well. Usually when we hear that, we think of elderly people, and certainly that can account for it. Less than 10% of your guests are over the age of 60. So that you may think, wow, then that's not something. No, kids trip and fall. We're in a market here where we get ice and snow, but poor lighting contributes to that. Carpets, carpet edges, carpet flow. I do a lot of work with vacation rental designers, and there's a whole different aspect of when it comes to design in a short-term rental versus design in your own home. And it's because people aren't as familiar walking around those patterns that you've established, walking from the kitchen to the deck through the living room. You put the rug there, it's there, but a guest who's staying there, who's got vacation brain, by the way, that's a real thing. It's a fog that they have when they're on vacation. They simply trip and fall, and there's that coffee table, and down they go, and it's an injury, and now it's a problem. So that's the most common one by far.
Okay. And what would you say is the second?
Another slip and fall after the slip and fall. There's so many different ones that we're seeing growing. Bunk bed incidents are big. 33,000 children in America fall out of a bunk bed every year. And that's why insurers are now charging higher premiums for them. They're very popular. They're easy. It's heads in beds. How many more people can I get into my property? But you just have to understand, spatial awareness of children as they develop is not as strong as adults. That's why they're much more likely to fall out of bed. Now you put them in a bunk bed. They may not have a bunk bed at home. Now they're on vacation. There's a bunk bed. That's why those guardrails, bunk beds have to meet federal safety requirements. There was a federal law put into a case in 2009. Grill related incidents are very high on the list. The number one reason your fire extinguisher at your short-term rental is going to have to be replaced or refilled is because of a grill fire. And so making sure that those are spaced away from the property, there's good education around them. I know that Traeger grill looks really good on your listing and it's $5,000 and it's fancy, but that's just too complicated for a guest who's, had a long day skiing and having a couple drinks afterwards to try and fire up. We got to keep things simple. So
Right.
they all quickly add up.
Yeah. No, and those are things that you think, I mean, your guests are using every single stay. And the kids always run into the bunk room and everybody wants to be on the top bunk. And that's where I think that danger comes in, and just making sure that we have the right mattress in there, that we have the right guardrails, and that someone, can't just fall out, but also can't slip through. And I think, you really have to look at a bunk bed and really evaluate all of the ways that you can imagine a kid climbing around on it, where an accident is so easy to happen. And thank you for bringing up grills too. I think, I hear from a lot of people that, that grills might actually move to like away from propane and getting a more of an electric style grill, that's just a lot safer. So I think that we all have to look at it a little bit differently, and think of the person that's going to just turn the propane up as much as they can and spark, and here we go.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, I also think of, my last visit, which was very recent, Moving Mountains. One of the things we're also seeing an increase in are hot tub related incidents, slips and falls, getting in and out of those. Had a big push on my last visit to try and get a lot of your property owners to they're under $100, just getting those handrails, when you consider the experience that a guest has getting from inside the property, getting their robe, getting their coffee, their wine, their cocktail, navigating out to the hot tub, getting the cover open, and then climbing in. We've seen a lot of injuries related to that. So having a handrail in place, making that process easy, is extremely important to keep those claims down.
yeah, I mean, that makes a lot of sense. I mean, we're in a high alpine environment. We do our best to mitigate snow and ice around hot tubs, but sometimes it's inevitable. And just having that extra handrail there is certainly a way to keep our guests a little safer getting in and out, for sure. So thank you again for mentioning that. I know that was part of the training as well.
That's right. One of the other ones that we're seeing an increase in is lithium battery related fires.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And so that's been slowly growing for a while. And one of the things that I'm concerned about in your market are e-bikes, the charging process for those, boot heaters, lithium batteries for boot heaters, and making sure that we're creating an awareness for the guests that when those things catch on fire, it's serious. It happens fast. There's been several at short-term rentals. And the reason that happens is either people are traveling with them and they get damaged. Also, when they arrive at the property, they may have forgot the charger that goes with their boot heater. So then, they're going down into Frisco, going to Target real quick, grabbing a charger cord that may not be what's recommended by the manufacturer. So that's been a whole new effort that we've been focused on recently, is creating that awareness around what can we do to ensure that not only is lithium battery safety being practiced in the properties, but detection for them as well. In the garages, you typically can't have a smoke alarm because of dust and the cold temperatures. So what other detection devices we have? And I've given your company a lot of recommendations, either from heat detectors or those new products out there, flame detectors, to make sure we have those areas covered to ensure that safety and that quick notification. It's all about quick notification so guests can get out and you can get fire trucks there quickly to address issues if they come up.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for keeping us ahead of that. And but that leads me to, like, what do you think the biggest misconception is, for homeowners about home safety,
Yeah.
and their sort of responsibility to it?
I think a lot think, well, my insurance didn't bring that up. So, I mean, if my insurance is okay with it, and I don't think people realize, or even worse, I have a really hard time with this. I love some of the fire safety inspections happening in Breckenridge or Vail or Steamboat, but again, they're only addressing 3% of the incidents. And so people think, well, we passed the city or county inspection, we're safe. And that false sense of security is so wrong. It's not even close to being where it is. And I can assure you, Again, no offense to those guys. I was a firefighter for 15 years.
Mhm.
They're not going to be beside you, defending you if an incident comes up. So you can't
Mhm.
be lax on it. Complacency is devastating. And so just because your insurance company or just because Vale Fire didn't flag something, that doesn't mean it's not a concern. And the code book will be referenced in any type of incidents you have. And when you sign your your insurance application, you agree that your property meets all building and safety codes. So you just because they didn't catch it when you sign that application doesn't mean that you can't be held accountable. And they could deny coverage. We're seeing an increase
Mhm.
in insurance carriers denying coverage because they weren't aware of that unsafe condition. You didn't bring it up, and you may not have known about it. So it's
Right.
that big gap there that leads to that false sense of security that concerns me the most.
Sure. And ultimately, our goal is we never want anybody to be in that position where you're having to defend something, and really just staying ahead of all of these things and keeping the guests safe. And so I do think it's important that just because, we get these certifications from the county or from the city, wherever they're coming from, that what we're doing as a company and what you've created is so much more in depth than any of those things. So it's really exciting that we're able to do that.
Yeah, I mean,
Um,
absolutely. Lithium batteries aren't mentioned in garage heat sensors and bunk beds. They're not in building code. So Vale and Breckenridge and Steam, they can't enforce those because they're not
right.
in the code. So that's where this difference is with the training that Moving Mountains has had, is that you're trained to look at and identify all of them. And I think the key word here is that I'm not walking around with an iron fist. You guys know that when I've come in. It's about being reasonable when it comes to addressing safety. And I think that the word reasonable is very important. If there's an issue, what can we do to address it in a cost-effective way that makes sense? And I think that that is really what's been a key to the success of all of our safety work that we've been doing for the past number of years. Is I've never walked into one of your properties and said, we're shutting this down now. All right, we got a problem here. What's the
Right.
solution? What can we do to fix it? That's why you're with Moving Mountains, is because you guys know how to solve and address these problems. You've seen it in other properties before, and you know where you've got to make sure that everything's addressed.
Yeah, and I think that it comes together because, as you're saying, I mean, these county codes, I think, are looking at catastrophic things,
Yeah.
fire and those big things, but the most common accidents that are happening are not necessarily covered under those codes. So it's just so important for us to make sure that we're looking at the entire picture.
I
Um,
I do a lot of presentations, and one of the graphics I show a lot is I'm afraid of sharks. My wife is she's practically an octopus, a mermaid. I mean, every time we go snorkeling, she's like, "Look, a shark," and I'm out of there. There's a 1 in 3.2 million chance I'm going to be bitten by a shark, but there's a 1 in 7,000 chance I'm going to slip and fall and be injured in the shower. And I don't know about you, but I wasn't scared in the bathroom this morning. So that's what we have to do. We have to look, and the statistics are real, they're factual. Your guests are very likely to have some sort of slip and fall in the bathroom. That's why you don't have bath mats on your floors at Moving Mountains in the bathrooms. They create trip hazards. Let the
mhm,
guests put down that towel that creates the bath mat. They've created their own trip hazard, if that hopefully doesn't happen, but if they do,
right.
so that's where that difference is.
Yeah, no, that definitely makes sense. And I think in our everyday life, we see safety items, right, that are in place in public places, and we're so used to seeing them. If you go to a hotel, you can see very obvious, safety items. What do you see coming in the future? Do you see there being, more strict regulations like there are in just in public places? Because as you said, we're hosting people from the public in our homes. What do you see happening in the future?
Yeah, and so this might be one of the scariest things I share here. So pay attention. If you do invest in property in the Smoky Mountains, near Smoky Mountains National Park, Gatlinburg, Pigeon Forge, that's a preview of what you're going to see spread across America. And there's a tremendous number of homes there that are being sold that were once short-term rentals, because they've put such strict safety regulations in place, exceeding what I even recommend. In some cases, they're requiring grills to be 30 feet from a house. Code doesn't even say that much. And requiring fire sprinkler systems. So an investment in safety right now in your property may actually turn out to be something that creates further equity in your property. And I think that's what we need to pay attention to. The Federal Hotel Motel Safety Act of 1990 did not include short-term rentals. I am part of international groups that are changing and looking at changing not only NFPA, which is National Fire Protection Association, but what Colorado has adopted, which is International Residential Code. Once those items go into code, they want to put short-term rentals in those codes, then the Colorado State Legislature adopts and changes those codes. Suddenly overnight, you're going to have requirements that you didn't think you did. Moving Mountains is already progressively helping you get in that direction. You're going to be ahead of the curve, and we've seen that happen in many markets. So I think that's really important looking to the future is more regulations, more code is coming, and you're going to be ready for it.
Yeah, no, that's great. And I think being ahead of it is always the place to be, because we don't want to be scrambling all of a sudden. These things are going to be in place on this date. And then how do we get it all done at one time? So thank you so much for working with us and keeping us ahead of that safety curve and teaching us all so many things that are so important, and having so many people on our team that are certified, that it's not just our safety, it's not just our maintenance guys, it's not just our QA. We have so many people on our team that even me, when I walk into a house, now I'm looking at, for all these little things and being able to make those suggestions. So before we end, is there anything at all that I missed that you wanted to tell our homeowners that I didn't ask you the right question?
Well, I think one of the important things to note is that, okay, safety can be a boring topic, and okay, I've got to make an investment in doing these things, but I think that there's a reward here. And I think that's really important to understand that reward. We don't always get patted on the back when we're doing things the right way. And at Moving Mountains, when you're get to the end of a year, end of a season, and you haven't had major incidents, that is a huge thing to be proud of. There are a lot of incidents, a lot of lawsuits. I get phone calls all the time from people asking me to be an expert witness in a claim against a homeowner. I don't do that work, fortunately. I'm trying to educate. So I think you need to understand, not only is there a reward in all this from that sense, but there's also a reward in that your guests are looking for it. A recent survey found that 82%, or excuse me, I'm getting exaggerated here, 62% of guests, when they're looking at a property, have safety on their mind. That's a huge number that they're doing that. So what's really good here is that people are going to be choosing properties to stay with you because you have addressed any concerns they may have about safety. And when they come stay in a property and they see a fire extinguisher and they see good smoke alarms and they see things that are addressing that, then they go stay with someone else. They go, wait a minute. When we stayed with Moving Mountains, they had all these safety features. We don't see that here. We're not comfortable. We're going to go back and stay with them. So I think that that's a really important distinction. And I can tell you for 100% fact, I work with several companies in Colorado. Moving Mountains is definitely far out and ahead. And I don't know that I'm going to hurt myself by saying that, but it's true. It is absolutely true. It goes back to, the founder of your company, Robin and Heather Cragen. Robin's from the UK. UK cares a lot about safety. That certainly was a start in it, in his background in boating. But as the company has grown, it's that foundation that's put you where you're at today.
Yeah. And I think that the idea of a safe home is part of our amenities, right? Guests are looking for hot tubs and a certain number of bedrooms, but I think if we think about safety as our most important amenity in the guest experience, then, we're going to keep staying ahead of that curve. So, thank you so much, Justin, for your time today. I think it's so great to continue these conversations, hear about the new things. The lithium batteries now is going to be on my mind, and how we're addressing those things. But again, staying ahead of the curve, keeping our guests safe, keeping our homeowners safe. We really appreciate everything that you do for Moving Mountains.
You'll never have the best pillows. You'll never have the best view. Your Wi-Fi speed may not be the fastest, but you can make your property the safest property it can be, and it doesn't cost much extra to do that. So thank you for having me on.
Thanks, Justin.